Talking about a major source of income, let's bring you back to that story about OPEC. OPEC meeting is holding next week, February 13th, the day before Valentine. That's on Tuesday. And, well, we do know that there's a lot of expectation from Nigeria and other OPEC members. But let's look at Nigeria, to see what we're expecting. Now we have joining us right now to tell us some of the things we could expect from this meeting, to tell us what we could expect from the meeting, as well as what Nigeria could be looking forward to this afternoon. And good afternoon.
Hi, Ini. Hi. Good to see you again.
Yeah. So, well, I guess we should start with the good news. This field, the new oil field that we have, and which should help Nigeria boost production. What do you expect from there?
Great question. So I suppose you're talking about the Akpo West oil field. I mean, it's a really exciting prospect for Nigeria. We've come out of a couple of years of deep challenges, around crude oil theft, which is one, but also pipeline vandalism. These things combined have meant that a lot of oil companies have refused to invest in the Nigerian oil and gas sector because of all the risks that they perceive in that space. Now, Akpo West is a fresh and new, oil field that, by all indications, has substantial resources, oil and gas resources in there, but also, very favorable in the current climate. We have a new government who have come and they're pushing up production, and I think they can very quickly take this field from sort of currently where it is into develop in a very short space of time. So overall, extremely positive, extremely upbeat. In fact, I've got to say this, that it's not just Nigeria that's seeing lots of successes in this space. We're seeing some successes as well in the Namib Basin, which is starting to become very mature. Last couple of years, they found, lots of discoveries. So it's great to see Nigeria coming back into this space.
Yeah, but, the discovery is fine. We applaud it, but some people will ask, what have we done with what we have? Because we still have to deal with oil theft. Else, this would just be another revenue or making platform for the thieves.
Yeah, 100%. I don't disagree with you at all on that sphere. Extremely blessed, lots of resources, without a doubt. Have we maximized those? Unfortunately, we haven't. We haven't maximized those resources, as you can imagine. In the last couple of years, you would have heard it from Mele Kyari, who said it over and over again, that we're losing up to 200,000 barrels per day to, oil and gas theft. But I think the good thing about it now in today's world is the fact that NNPCL have just launched, actually not just launched, a couple of months ago, they launched a crude theft tracking app, and so far there have been lots of successes because it has to do with the communities there. Lots of the communities would see something and they'll report it, and a lot of the successes you saw in the last few where people were caught, bunkering, and all the vessels that were arrested, much of those were products of the new app that was just launched. So on other fronts, I'd say great successes. We're making steady progress, which is why we're going from 1.2 million barrels 1.2 million barrels per day, about a year ago, to where we are today, about 1.5. And I think that needs to be celebrated.
So I guess it's too early to expect this to be part of the conversations at the OPEC meeting next week. They will just give us our performance in previous months.
Yes, 100%. If you're talking about the field, the oil and gas field that's been found, you're 100% right. That's way too early. It's just a discovery for now. Just found oil, so that wouldn't form part of it. What would be really important, without a doubt, are the steady efforts curbing some of these oil theft and vandalism, and how we're seeing steady growth. So if we go back to November, Nigeria's crude oil production was approximately 1.3 million barrels per day. Okay, so quite modest. In December, we went 100,000 barrels higher, 1.4 million barrels, which is really encouraging. In January, it's gone, slightly higher up again. So we're anticipating this to see that Nigeria will be gaining market share. There will be an increase in market share for Nigeria. But the fundamental question again, which remains, is what are other OPEC players doing? We saw a couple of weeks ago the Saudi cut back, in terms of capital deployment. Would they put capital in that sort of, into new oil and gas developments? They've pushed back from doing that, and we've seen a couple as well. So I think there's certain areas where we'll see, huge movement and, in that regard, without a doubt.
So you don't think we should be so excited about the 1.7 target that the Minister of State has set for Nigeria?
No, I think there's a couple of things there in it. One of it is the fact that, without a doubt, there should be huge optimism, because we've seen a situation where these investments have worked, powerfully. Like I said, we went from 1.2 million barrels per day. That's increased very steadily all the way to where we are today. At 1.74 is not that far away. In fact, if you ask me, I think the target needs to be a lot more ambitious. Nigeria can produce 2 million barrels of crude, quite easily and comfortably. And I think setting a really high target would allow us to get to that 1.74 that people are touting. But it needs to be steady progress, like I was saying. We've seen us go from 100,000 barrels per day, which is on one side of it, and it increased steadily all the way to where we are. I do think there are lots of gears that we can shift to get to 1.74 and even 2 million barrels beyond that.
So you some time ago mentioned about the Saudi, their strategy, which is that they are doing production cuts now, obviously to try to boost prices and all of that. So each country should formulate strategies that will, favor their economy. As we go into the meeting, what should be Nigeria's strategy in the face of our realities?
So there are a couple of things to bear in mind there, just before we go into it. Saudi Arabia, obviously, yes, one of the members of 13-man OPEC group, without a doubt, yes. But Saudi is the leader in that group. Saudi has been a country traditionally that has dealt with, all of the weather, increases. So they have the spare capacity, they raise production as required or cut it back as required. So they've played a balancing role in the market space, if you see what I mean. So them deciding not to put up capital for further expansion, it's a bit different, though. It's a bit different from what Nigeria is. Nigeria, you can argue, we are, give or take, call it 1.6 million barrels, per day, generally, on average over the last couple of years. Our role has been slightly different. Of course, we're a very important OPEC member, but we are not the dominant player in that space. So the strategy that Nigeria would deploy would need to be a bit different, a bit like what you saw with Angola. 3 months ago, Angola, being part of OPEC, elected to come out of OPEC, and their production was about 1.2 million barrels per day. The reason why they elected to come out was because some of the policies that we're seeing in OPEC was not favorable to them. Because it's not just OPEC who's dominating the market today. The US, you can see production coming from the shale players in Dakota, North Dakota, and other parts of the US. And all of these guys are coming, putting new barrels onto the market, and those barrels, as you can imagine, is depressing the price of crude oil. And so if you're a small player in that space and you do not have a great capital strategy for you to invest in, earn revenue from that, from oil, then very quickly you'd see that the strategies being deployed benefit the high market players, and you could get squeezed. So I think that's the sort of thing that we saw. Some of the situations, the policies that were being deployed were unfavorable to small players, but without a doubt, Nigeria needs to think very critically around how it deals with the changing landscape of the marketplace.
Yes, Nigeria pulling out anytime, would that be of any good to the country?
No, I'm not at all suggesting that Nigeria should move out. That's not the point I'm trying to make there. The point I'm trying to make is smaller players, some of them have had to do that. They've elected to do that and had to move out of the market space. The point I'm making is, Nigeria stands at a very critical juncture. There's huge capacity for it to increase its oil and gas production in a very short space of time. We've traditionally come over the last couple of years, maybe the last 2 years, I'd say. In fact, we went down to about 900,000 barrels per day. Okay, so if you think about that, all of that spare capacity Nigeria could have produced and the opportunity cost of what we've lost in that space, it needs to clobber back very quickly. So if I was the representative, Nigeria's representative in OPEC, I will be sitting down very candidly and trying to see how we can push Nigeria's oil production over and beyond so we can fill that capacity. So just to put this out, actually, total OPEC production today, as we speak, is about 26 million barrels per day. If you go back to November, total OPEC production was about 27, about 28 actually, million barrels per day. So OPEC is being squeezed itself. OPEC is being squeezed down because there are new entrants in the market. The US is coming in and putting additional barrels onto the market space, and that's challenging everyone, and the oil price is decreasing. Nigeria needs to think strategically about that. It needs to think that, you know what, we need to fill that capacity. We need to go back to 2 million barrels per day, which is where we were a couple of years ago, because that will bring the foreign exchange that we need. And of course, you know this. If you look around where we are today in Nigeria's economy, there's huge inflation. There's ravaging the entire economy. Why is it doing that? Mainly because foreign exchange is very constrained today. Oil and gas is one of the areas that brings a huge amount of foreign exchange to Nigeria. And if we earn that, we bring a bit of market stability and hopefully, help with the massive inflation that we're seeing in Naira.
Just before I let you go, I'm just curious, do you think one day OPEC will not be so relevant or so strong anymore with all of these changes?
That's a great question, I've got to say. So this question was partly answered in 2014. The question you've just asked. So in 2014, just to put this out there, the price of oil is about $120 per barrel, 2018. The shale producers, mainly in the Bakken area of the US and the lower 48, started to produce crude oil and putting those onto the marketplace. There was an oversupply. Okay, so there was an oversupply of crude oil in 2014, and because of that, crude oil plunged very, very quickly. Now, when it plunged very quickly, there was that whole thing around, well, would OPEC cut oil supply? And OPEC did cut after a while. It cut down its barrel on the marketplace. But the more OPEC was cutting, the more the US was filling that capacity. Quite frankly, we are in exactly that situation today. It happened in 2014, it's happening again. There's an oversupply that's going on onto the market. Even though a lot of that capacity, those barrels are being put up, are being taken off, the pressure on price, you can see that. A month ago, 2 months ago, we're $87 per barrel. We're $90 per barrel. Today, we're about $80 per barrel. And much of that is the pressure of oversupply that's coming in. So to your question, OPEC has consistently been the market balancer. If the world needs more oil, OPEC produces more. Saudi Arabia increases capacity. If the world needs less, it cuts back on oil production so it can stabilize the price. Unfortunately, or fortunately, however you look at it, that role is being played by the US producers today. They are filling capacity. OPEC is trying its best, but they are also putting barrels on the market, and it's changing the dynamic quite a lot. And you would know this, for the very first time in a long time, the US is the highest crude oil producer in the world, 13 million barrels per day, even higher than Saudi. Saudi is approximately 12 or 11 million barrels per day. So this just shows you how the market is changing very rapidly.
Yeah, change, you say, is the only constant thing in life. Well, thank you so much for sharing your views and insights with us this afternoon. Chinan Dikwo, the energy expert and the Vice Chair, African Energy Council. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.